Hey YouTube, King Friday here. Today's video is going to be on the new Survarium 0.41 patch. I've had a chance to play around with it a little bit, so I want to go through it and give my opinion. This patch brings about quite a few changes visually and also some balances, so let's dive right into it. Just so you're aware, I'm going to go in order by what is listed on the news post. So first thing is this Heroes of the Day. I don't think this was a feature that was really well thought out. To be honest with you, this is a kind of feature that could attract hackers, because by being the best player for the day, it gives you extra experience, silver, and reputation. Hackers have that mentality of trying to be better than everyone else, so this is something that they're going to try and go for. At the same time, though, I could see how this could help weed out hackers. So if Vostok is actually checking these players at the end of the day, great. That's one way to weed them out too. So it's got its positive and negatives, so hopefully Vostok is using it in that way. Next thing that they're talking about on the news post here is the bleeding characteristics. Seems that now that you have a higher chance of bleeding, depending on how much armor penetration your weapon has compared to their armor, as well as bleeding has a higher chance of starting depending on how much damage a certain body part is taken. That seems to be fine. In playing on this new patch, I really haven't noticed much of a difference, but it's probably due to the fact of just my play style, because as soon as I'm done engaging someone, I usually head for cover and I use a medkit. For new players, they've introduced a protection from anomalies. It seems for the first 10 matches or so. That's great. It allows people to learn a little bit about the game itself, hopefully to avoid frustrations from not knowing what the anomalies are at the very beginning. It says here that Last Stand game mode was also disabled, which, to be honest with you, I've only played 1 or 2 matches of that, and it wasn't really that fun anyway. Alright, in this next section here is the supplies, and this is where we start getting into the meat of this patch. Tactical supplies, in my opinion, were a pretty darn good idea. You can now carry grenades and smoke grenades into battle, or you can use one of the other new devices that just came out as well. I've been able to play around with the throwable sensors, and they are quite fun to use. At this time, I don't think that they're necessarily overpowered, but I can definitely see how somebody could get very good with those. They certainly help with room clearing, but I can also see how they would help deter spawn campers. A lot of my friends whom I play with don't spec up to take care of anomalies. So the anomaly capacitor is quite a neat little idea that helps them out so they can take out 1 or 2 anomalies that are in their way. So this is a pretty good addition in my opinion. I have not been able to play around with the stationary sensor yet. I'm not tier 8 in Renaissance Army. It's similar to the throwing sensor, but instead of a 10-meter radius, it's 15 meters, and instead of 10 seconds, it's 30 seconds. Seeing as how I'm unable to play with it yet, I really don't have an opinion on it. I do like the throwing sensors, so I can't really say whether or not the stationary sensor would be overpowered or not. The healing totems and ammo boxes are another great addition. In my mind, I see it encouraging more team play rather than just run and gun. Another thing that they changed is the all your tactical items, including medkits and other things of the like, now affect what tier you are put into as well. For some items, I think this was a great implementation. For others, I'm kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other on. Capping medkits at tier 4 is kind of annoying, but at the same time we still have bandages, which now actually have use in low tiers. On the other hand, RGO grenades are pretty gnarly. So now on lower tiers you are forced to use RGD grenades, which are timed, versus the RGO impact grenades, which in my opinion is a good thing. Vostok added a bunch of new weapons and also armor to the game, as well as a few devices for us to use. I'm going to go over the armors first. First we got some new black market biker pants, which are on par with the Renaissance Army pants, but they weigh less and they have ammo bags instead. Next we have the Saboteur Helmet for scavengers, which is on par with the Marauder Helmet, except it weighs slightly less. The new Stalker Helmet for fringe settlers offers the same armor as the Mounting Helmet for the scavengers, but a slightly higher anomaly protection, and it weighs just slightly more. The new Tier 7 Black Market Helmet, called the Sentry Helmet, now has the highest armor class of its tier, but it has a lower anomaly protection and it weighs much more. Next up are the weapons. The Ash 12, AK 12, and FN Mini-Me I really can't speak for. I'm not that high tier yet. I will say, however, that the Ash 12 is very overpowered. The damage nerf that it got hopefully will do some good. I hear that the AK 12 needed the buff, so hopefully that will do some good. As for the Mini-Me, I can't really speak for it. Same goes for the Chris Vector. Now the RPK and the UMP 45 both definitely needed their damage increased. With the RPK's slow fire rate it didn't really have much an effect in the battlefield. I've been able to play with it a little bit. I must say that it is much more effective now that it has a slight damage increase. The Tier 2 Uzi for a while there was actually better than the Tier 4 UMP45, though with the damage increase that it has gotten, it is certainly more effective now than it was previously. The SKS and the SOK94 got a much needed nerf. You can no longer spam fire these weapons, meaning you have to take careful aim with their shots now instead of just hip firing somebody into oblivion. These two weapons were extremely annoying to go up against. They are still quite effective, but at least now you'll have a better chance at going up against them. I've got to play around with the new Svu Sniper Rifle as well. Looking at the stats, it's more or less just about the same as the SVD, except that it fires slightly faster and it has a higher armor penetration. One last thing that they changed that's worth mentioning here is the fact that you can no longer dismantle weapons and armor. I find this kind of annoying and I don't really see the reason why they did this. I'm hoping that they will re-implement it in the future. Now they added this new anti-radar veil for Tier 9 scavengers. It's in Tier 9. So, in my opinion, what was the point? Nobody's going to be able to use it until high tier matches. Alright, moving on to modifiers here. It seems that Tier 10 armors have been most of what has been changed. And honestly, this is a negative of this patch. Higher tiers, there seems to be a large gap between the tiers themselves. Meaning that someone who's Tier 8 going up against a Tier 10 has a severe disadvantage. And yet, Vostok continues to give advantages to the higher tiers. In this case, higher tier armors now, for example, have the ability to get recoil anywhere between 2% and 5%, whereas lower tiers are only between 1% and 3%. On top of that, they continue to get speed buffs when they need to get speed nerfs. More than once I've gone up against a Tier 9 guy moving around at lightning speed. I cannot fathom why they would change this. The system that was in place before this patch was fine. I didn't have any problems with it. But again, I'm seeing this continuing trend of giving advantages to the higher tiers and taking away advantages from the lower tiers. One could argue, obviously, that lower tiers are not going to be fighting high tiers, right? But the thing is, the highest tier that I have achieved so far is Tier 8, and anytime that I'll go up against Tier 9s or Tier 10s, I'm always at an extreme disadvantage. They just have better weapons, they have better armor, period. And it's not like the weapons and armor are slightly better, they are vastly better. Honestly, this gap in the tiers is about the only thing that I really have a major complaint about with Vostok. So hopefully they will start to listen and bring that gap closer together so that a Tier 8 can have a chance of fighting a Tier 10. In this next section it goes into visuals and animation, but other than, let's see, they updated the lighting in the lobby and added a tactical reload for the Vepr Wanderer. I'm not going to cover those, it doesn't matter. I will, at the end of the video here, show you some differences in the two renderers though, and I'll put the images side by side. Another thing that comes with 0.41 is much improvement to the UI, or much changes I should say. First off, they added some presets that you can use for your equipment. These are actually a really nice addition that I'm liking. I've had some people complaining about the fact that you only get 10 save slots though. My suggestion is use your save slots only for armor, and then all you have to do is drag and drop your weapons over. This makes things way simpler to set up, and much faster. Seems they got rid of the faction screen. Instead now, when you click on the faction, it just takes you to the shop and you can choose your faction from there. I really don't know why they did this, because the other system was fine, but whatever. It's not that big of a deal. One of the big changes in this patch is the new in-game user interface. They changed it up quite a bit, and now it's more on par with what they changed in the previous patch, 0.40. So the style has been changed more to look like the main menu. The mini-map was changed, the fonts and text were changed, as well as a lot of the icons for many of the items in the game. Honestly, in my opinion, the improvements to the UI or the changes, they look fine. And I think that it goes along well with the style that they're choosing to go with. You can definitely tell that they're taking a bit of inspiration from the Battlefield series. You can especially tell that at the endgame screen when it's scrolling through, showing you all the medals that you received and so on from the battle. This is not a bad thing, and honestly, it works. And it looks cool. Last thing I want to talk about is this new renderer. And in the background here, I'm going to show some differences between the two. I have the image split here. Playing with this, with VSync turned off, I can get frames on ultra settings up to about 160, averaging around about 140 or so. It's a definite and very significant improvement in performance over the other renderer. But, obviously, there is a much difference in quality of rendering. So for those of you who are looking to get as many frames a second as you can out of this game, you can use this renderer. For people like myself who have a much better PC, I can run this game with the old renderer just fine, so I will probably end up just using that. The new renderer isn't bad. It is what it is. It's meant to be played with PCs that have inferior hardware. There is one problem that I see that has been happening on my PC for some reason, and that isn't texture streaming. It tends to be extremely slow. At times, some textures don't load in and they continue to look very muddy, but that is about my only complaint with this new renderer. On a last note, I do want to state something. I'm getting very tired of playing in higher tier matches. I'm not joking when I feel like I have a major disadvantage when I'm playing in higher tiers. The highest I have achieved so far is tier 8. I'm almost tier 9. But playing against even tier 9 players has been proving to be quite frustrating, and I'm getting very tired of it. I understand that player skill plays a big factor in this. In fact, many of the players that are in tier 10 are most likely better than I am. But in a situation where I clearly have the advantage, I should be able to put these players down. I find more often than not, I have to empty out an entire magazine into someone before they will go down. In most of those situations, the other player will spin around, pop 2 shots into me, and I'm done. On top of that, many of the higher tier weapons, especially in tier 9, have low amounts of recoil and very high fire rates. I've seen guys actually take me out and other players halfway across the map with the fucking P90. It's incredibly frustrating and makes me not want to play in these higher tiers. So I end up usually tearing down into 5 or 6 where I can actually play with weapons that are a bit more fairly balanced. But again, this is about the only complaint I have with the game at the moment. Anyway, this is all that I really wanted to cover in this patch. Considering everything, I think this patch is quite good. So if you have any suggestions on things that I may have missed, or perhaps information that I have wrong, please leave a comment below. I'm King Friday, have a good one. Damn it, shithead spamming grenades from up top.